So usually when people are studying computer science, like the first year is like much more foundational, where it's like, oh, like you do one of a few like introductory and intermediate classes to just like get a base foundation in the field. But beyond that, it's pretty much the world's your oyster, where like there are some requirements and like general directions, but like I think two things I'd note is like one, the requirements are very flexible even within the major. And second, like most of the requirements are like soft requirements in the sense that it's very easy to get like permissions or like overrules for those. So like I probably broke all the like requirement or rules for like the concentration. And at the end of the day, like it ended up being, yeah, like I can take whatever 15 or 20 computer science classes like I want to take and combine that into like a degree that's computer science.
So what was
So
your sort of path within those choices?
So I started off with very theoretical, algorithms focused stuff, very academic. But as I like moved through college, took a bunch of other classes outside the department, I realized that what I like to do a lot is like much more product design and thinking about like, okay, who's using my things? Like, how do I design products that are better? And that pushed me to take much more like UI focused classes or like just interaction design focused classes towards the end of my CS like education. And because there was not a lot of like rules or restrictions, like I didn't have to commit. Like I could pretty much like make that jump on my own.
So that's interesting. The UI, UX, and human-centered design is also something that you mentioned earlier, or interfaces. What is it like to go deeper into study of the aspect of design in computer science? If you were to describe it to a layman, of course, we see apps and websites and other things. But what does it really take to do well in that field?
I think one way to think of it is how do you design solutions and products that work for humans rather than the other way around? And that obviously needs an understanding of computer science and how computers work, but it's mostly like, how do you make sure that you're designing the right thing for the right person? I think one quick example is like doors, right? Like a lot of doors are like, you don't really know where it's like, if you're supposed to push it or pull it. And it doesn't really mean that the person is stupid. It means that the door is not well designed.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so typically, what does a UI UX engineer do in a day-to-day sort of setting?
So if you have a background in say like HCI or product design, there's a bunch of different paths that people could take. You could become like a UI UX researcher or like user researcher, which is like the more academic side of things, where you actually do research on like how do things like affect someone and like actually run studies and user experiments. You could be a visual designer. You could become like a front end developer, or you could become like a PM like me, where you actually like combine a lot of those things and think about like, okay, what product am I building? Why am I building? And also tie in some business responsibilities where like, are people going to buy this product?
Fantastic. So now tell me a little bit about the master's program, the coordinated master's program at Brown in the computer science department. How did the requirements work, and how do you sort of justify the need for doing that?
Sure. So to give a quick overview, Brown has like the CS masters can be done in 3 different ways. One is like the regular masters, where you spend 2 years after your bachelor's degree doing a master's in computer science. Then there's like a 5th year master's program where it's like accelerated, and you spend your 5th year like doing your master's. And then there's like a smaller program called the concurrent master's program. And what happens is you finish all the requirements for the bachelor's and the master's degree within your 4 years. So it's like, in terms of the amount of work you're doing, it's equivalent to like if you had spent 5 or 6 years, it's just compressed into those 4 years. And for me, it was because I took a lot of CS classes and I took a lot of classes in general. So like the number of classes you take at Brown is something that's also flexible. And I had a lot of credits by the time I entered like sophomore, junior year. So this was something that was like natural for me to do. where if you see that like, okay, like with a little bit of additional or marginal effort, you can finish the requirements for both the bachelor's and the master's. It's like you're getting 2 degrees instead of 1.
Great. You definitely seem to have maybe burnt the candle on both ends. But yeah, so good. Now, in terms of internships or overall, the mood on campus for computer science majors, I know it's become such a popular major across campuses in the US. But what are the resources beyond academics in terms of alumni connections, people coming to campus, recruiters, internship opportunities, the challenges you might be part of, competitions, etc.? What all do you do beyond just the classes and your projects?
So specifically for professional opportunities, there's like the career lab, which is for like students across the spectrum, like no matter what field you're in. But then the CS department has its own recruiting program where companies come and recruit specifically with the CS department. And there's like industry partners who come and like do on-campus interviews. So, like your first rounds of interviews are going to happen like on campus. And something that helped me a lot is like the alumni network. There's a lot of people like graduating every year and joining a lot of like tech companies. And if those are like companies you're interested in, then alums are usually very, very responsive because it's like a fairly small department. Like, yes, the CS department skyrocketed and it's like the largest department in school now, but it's still like a few hundred people, like 200-300 people graduating every year. So like I've had almost like more than a 50% response rate to like any person I've reached out to who's like a recent alum. So it's less a question of like, from most people, what I've seen is it's less a question of like, can I get this job? It's more a question of, do I want to do this job?
Interesting. Yeah. So that's the abundance mindset, I think, that's available in terms of alumni connection. What about the other things like the challenges, hackathons, conferences, anything that sort of sets you apart in terms of not just building your profile, but also getting you more brownie points when you apply for jobs? Did you participate in some of these?
I did a lot. I did a lot of hackathons my freshman year. There's one on campus as well, which is particularly geared towards first-time learners and people who are not necessarily like experts in the field. So it's like a great place for people to just start. There's also a lot of funding for different conferences like Grace Hopper. So if someone who identifies as a person of color or any of these groups like that a lot of these conferences are targeting, then like there's a lot of funding opportunities that's university sponsored. And like a lot of my friends use that, and I've heard like it was immensely helpful as well.
Fantastic. So if you were to look at the first internships or jobs, and then finally what led you to sort of find opportunities after you graduate, what was the journey like? What are the sort of, say, moments of discovery which led you to where you are today?
So when I first started, my first 2 summers, I did research. That's actually something that's like very common and popular among underclassmen because like the professors are very accessible. You can spend an entire summer doing research with like an actual professor and not just grad students. And it's like fairly easy to get just because of the ratio of students to professors. There's the grad student population is like very small, so there's a lot of opportunities available for undergraduates. And I think like a lot of students do research their first few summers because it's harder to do the summer after your junior year. So I started doing research. Then summer after my junior year, I ended up interning at Facebook. And how that worked was, I think for a lot of recruiting, I would just reach out to friends who had recently graduated or people I knew who had recently graduated, and they'd help me recruit. Plus, there'd be like dedicated recruiters for every company, and you go through a bunch of interviews. So one or the other is inevitably going to work out. And then based on like personal preferences, most people pick a company, see like what they think And I think like internships are a great way to just figure out like, hey, is this something I really want to do after I graduate?